Hi, everybody. This is the Bronx Tech Show. This is week 3. My name is Miguel Sanchez of Mass Ideation, The Rise TV, and MetaBronx.
And I'm Philip Shearer, representing Scenic, The Glass Files, and MetaBronx.
As you know, the Bronx Tech Show, we interview entrepreneurs and people in the innovation sector. Today we're here with Sarah Poyet.
She's the founder and CEO of The Glass Files. Welcome, Sarah, to the Bronx Tech Show.
Thank you, Philip and Miguel.
So you and I know each other very well. We're co-founders of The Glass Files, and your startup was in the first cohort of the MetaBronx Accelerator. So are you ready to tell us your story?
I guess so.
All right, great. So, simple question. What brought you to the madness of becoming an entrepreneur?
Well, that's a lot of different things. It was not really a straight path, but I've known you for a long time since we were in high school, so I always kind of followed what you were doing on the tech side. And then specifically, years ago, my mom told me that I should find out the story of the life of my grandfather, and I was getting into video production at the time.
So that's when is that?
That was in 2007. So
okay.
Like over 10 years ago. Crazy.
And so what brought you to video production? Just a little background on
Scenic, really. And well, in particular, a guy named Olivier Lausanne. And I was always a storyteller, and very interested in the arts. So video seemed like a natural medium for me to be attracted to.
And you spent little time in the circus, is that?
Yes, I did. That's not so unusual for people nowadays, I think. But I was training on the trapeze with Circus Una in Queens. We went to St. Louis.
Yeah, and so you said it's not a straight path that brought you to entrepreneurship.
No, it was really different experiences, and then also probably a propensity for not listening to anything that anybody says ever. Which, makes it kind of hard to keep a job for any length of time. And really leads you to be on the outskirts and on the pioneering end of things. Yeah, being your own boss.
And so eventually you got into video production, and then
I got into video production, and I began working on editing documentary projects and starting to shoot my own. And at the beginning, I mean, it was pretty messy, but when I started working with you, it was after I had shot a short film about 10 days that I had spent traveling in Mexico, and you showed me how to mix the audio for that. So that was a bit of a starting point for me in terms of getting more deeply into video production. And I mean, by that time I had already shot the footage of my grandfather, which ended up miraculously to be well recorded thanks to Canon GL2. Thank you.
We're not a sponsor yet, but they will be.
Should be a sponsor.
Exactly. Yeah. But I had 9 hours of that footage, and it's really, while I was pursuing all this other stuff, it just sat on the shelf. And as I was getting more deeply into video and doing business development for that, and simultaneously you had always said that was a valuable project, that something interesting could be done with. And when I went once to an industry panel at the Tribeca Film Festival where the marketing director of GE was speaking, I improvised a pitch to her, and she gave me her card, and that really set me on the path. And the pitch was the story of Walter, my grandfather, even though at the beginning it has nothing to do with GE. The early experiences of his life really informed the work that he was doing later on for them. He worked for them for 30 years. So I told her about that story, about him growing up in Vienna, witnessing the Hitler's army marching into Vienna on the street that he lived, and weeks later being expelled from high school for no reason other than being Jewish. Forced to stay at home, he played Rachmaninoff on the piano and read Hitler's book Mein Kampf and realized that everything Hitler said he was going to do, he'd already started doing, and there was no reason to believe that he wouldn't do everything he said in the book. So my grandfather began his efforts to leave Austria and basically just kept trying until he managed, had fights with his father along the way because his dad believed nothing would ever happen. So that was like a transformative story that really my grandfather had never told anybody in depth. Not his own kids. They had like a vague idea. And when I went and with the camera asked him, it just all came pouring out. He was ready to share it. So that kind of was a life-changing thing for me, even though it took many years for me to get to the point of starting a company. Based on that, it really was. I had no idea how like pivotal that would be at the time that I did it.
And so, how do you get to from a pitch to General Electric executive about your grandfather's legacy to the glass files?
That's an excellent question. I mean, the first iteration that we presented to Lindebaugh from GE was a site where GE alumni would tell the legacy of the company story through their own experiences. And I had the contacts of various people that my grandfather had worked with throughout his life who were younger than him, though they were very hard to reach. And I still wasn't even sure what I was asking from them. And so that was the first iteration, which, they were excited about, but didn't fund. So then when I went and kind of started talking to other people about this prototype that we wanted to build, it was my dad who said, there could be a much larger market if you're experiencing this challenge of how to publish your family history, then probably a lot of other families are having the same problem. And so that's what led us on the track to build a really consumer product, which is what the Glass Files is now, which the software version 1, it's not 1.0 anymore. It's like 1.6. There have been like a few iterations. You're the CTO. So 1.6, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Yeah.
You built a consumer product, and
right.
Then what happened from that point on?
And
when was this, by the way, that you...
Just over a year ago. So we launched version 1.0 just over a year ago. Now we've already updated the software multiple times. We're closer to 1.6, version 1.6. And when we launched, we thought we were marketing directly to families, and that additionally we would pursue historical societies and small museums to sort of anchor the history component of the family history search. What ended up happening is that educators, well, I presented at the New York Tech Meetup, and I'm pretty sure that's when we started talking to teachers right off the bat who came to see us and asked us questions about using the software as part of their curriculum, because history is, what we've learned from students is kind of like nap time. So
That's for me.
yeah. So it was like high time we, updated that experience. And that's basically, we're bridging history and the humanities with technology through the glass files. And working with schools. So we didn't even know we were an education product, but yes, we are. We're a consumer ed tech product.
So that's a clear
Mass market.
pivot, right? So like, what as a entrepreneur, because we all go through it, right? Every single entrepreneur has to pivot. What were some of the key things you saw that said, okay, it's time to pivot?
Well, you just have to go where the traction is, right? Like, you don't have the luxury, like, you can't decide what your market is going to be. You have to discover what it is. So I wouldn't say that we didn't, is that what it, like, I never really understood what the term pivot means. We're still building the same product. We have the same goals with it, but we did have to change our marketing strategy and our sales strategy.
That's kind of a pivot, because at the end of the day, you have kind of an initial idea of what you think is going to work. And then as you see different lanes, you have to say, okay, should we continue on this lane, or
you kind of have to go full speed ahead with the lane that works.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of especially at
Makes
the
sense.
beginning, you have no money. You need to run after that
The
wherever
money.
it looks like it's going to come from.
That makes sense.
Didn't think it would be the Department of Education, but it's been really fascinating working more and more with students, with schools, and just seeing also what the level of technology adoption is in the different schools, and what experience of technology students have.
How about like knowledge of their own history?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's all related. I think that there's definitely a lot of curiosity about, some students have a lot of curiosity about their own history, and then other students might be scared to go there. Yeah, that's what I found.
Because as you can imagine, MetaBronx, we service communities of color. The Glass Files is in the communities of color, and let's just say the stories are probably not like normal white picket fence. It's dad got shot, stuff like that, right? So it's like, how do you like continue to keep that something that they want to do without making it too painful, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's been something that I'm learning. I mean, the idea with, like, why is it important to know history on any level? It's so that we can make informed decisions for the future and not repeat the mistakes of the past. So I think that also applies to, like, individuals and families, right? Like, understanding the choices that certain people, like, as hard as it must be to look at that, especially when you're 16, just being aware of the fact that you're not destined to do the same thing, to make the same mistakes that you might see your parents or your grandparents made, is, I think, an important thing to realize.
That makes sense.
You tell me.
No, it makes sense to me. Like, ever since I heard about this project, even myself, I said, okay, how do I start documenting my family history? Because my family history's pretty weird, just like most people from these communities, right? I've had family members that have done some of the craziest things you can imagine, right? And it's like, I would love to document that.
Remember some stories.
Yeah. She's heard some of the stories. So, is there any advice for people that are that would love to document their family history?
Yeah.
And how could they get into the process of doing it for the Glass Files?
Yeah. I mean, it's a complex process, but now that everybody has a recording device in their pocket every day, it's about photos, videos, and audio recordings. And what I learned from being a videographer is that audio quality is kind of like the first thing you want to think about, because the story that is going to be told is, it'll be really important and emotional to hear the person's voice who's speaking. So really just, putting out some basic guidelines on making a good recording that are just kind of like pay attention to the sound in the room. Is it loud? Is it quiet? How far are you from the person speaking? Like, those are really practical guidelines. I mean, I was really lucky because my grandfather wasn't camera shy.
Yeah, I could imagine that. Like, my grandparents are dead now, right? But I could imagine trying to interview them. It would not be easy.
Yeah.
And then it's like, how do you drum up the juicy stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, because there's some of the stuff they may not want to talk about either, right?
Yeah.
Like, that story must have been painful, right? He tried to convince his family to leave and they didn't.
Sure.
So,
I mean, there's other ways of documenting your family story that are less intrusive, right? You can have photography, and then you should just
write the
write.
story.
Exactly. You should write the story down.
I just think video now is such an important thing that we, like you said, we have the ability. Like, I literally remember seeing video of the age I was born and realizing I don't have video of that because my parents couldn't afford a camera.
Right.
So I don't have video. But my kids, I have a billion videos of them, right? So, like, now that we have it, it's kind of a shame not to have both video and audio. And I find that the part that I'm missing is the storytelling, right? Like, I'll record my son playing, but there's no story behind it. And even now, I'm trying to teach my kids how to tell stories themselves so they can go off and do it, right? Because I hope I can leave some stories behind about stuff that we're doing, so they can. Because right now they don't understand. I literally tell my kids I'm Iron Man, and they believe me. One day you'll learn.
Yeah, they're young, right? They're like 8.
Yeah, it's 8. I have twin 8-year-olds and a 4-year-old.
Right.
So
yeah, it's really middle school is kind of when you would start with the real storytelling.
But they watch YouTube religiously, like most children now, and they're starting. Once I start explaining to them, they're like, "Oh yeah, this guy does that, or this kid does that." So I think we're coming into like the golden age of storytelling, where everyone is capable of doing it. It's not just the people with the $8,000 camera who could afford it. I think everybody has these phones. Now it's up to us to make sure we're telling our stories. And even this is part of it, right? Like creating podcasts and videos. We want to start telling our stories. And I think what the Glass Files does is it allows people to connect their stories to actual history, right?
Yes,
So
that's
that was
right.
Yeah.
Putting it in context, right?
Context,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, so for instance, Sarah's grandfather during the Nazi regime, right? So how many other stories similar are like that out there, you know?
Exactly. Like, there was like a clear historical component there, but what I found from talking to a lot of people is that every family like goes through these phases of like survival, and
that's good, actually.
whether the stories get passed down deliberately or not, I do believe that the future generations like hold that, even if it's an unspoken tension, like that gets passed on. If it's because not all stories are.
That makes sense, and I don't think
things you want to share.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think most families share that. You either have to know it, and you may be like burdened to know it, but nobody else knows it.
Yeah.
And I think
like
part of, like you said, part of like what you said about not repeating, kind of have to start documenting a lot of stuff. I even think like this is probably the first generation that every part of what happened to us can be traced and
Yeah.
backed up. Like, it's funny because my dad, my dad still does not know if his birthday is the day that he celebrates it or the day before, because it's like the document could have been changed and all these different things, and it's like that's how one generation ago it was that bad. Now the blockchain and stuff like that exists, right? And it's like it changes this quick, and now we have cell phones, which didn't even exist like 10 years ago, right?
Exactly.
So now cell phones with cameras that are better than
Yeah, you're talking about smartphones, right?
smartphones, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Made us
social
smarter.
media, right? Made us smarter, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So, as a female entrepreneur that chose to go in that direction, what advice would you give to other people, women?
Rather than females.
Sorry.
I have objections to the female terminology.
Why?
Well, because it's, female. There's this automatic association with, it sounds like we're talking about animals, right?
We don't talk about
think-
males as much.
Well,
Male entrepreneurs.
what's funny is that we talk about men.
Got it.
So technically, really, we should always be talking about women, rather than
Sure.
yeah.
I'm on board.
Also, try to avoid referring to younger women as girls. That also I find is
Discriminatory.
well, it's not discriminatory per se, but it's just weird. What's the equivalent for men?
Boys.
Yeah, but you wouldn't say that about an entrepreneur just because they're young, right? Like you don't look at
Sure.
young engineers and say
Girls who code.
Boy who codes.
right.
Boy meets
boys,
world.
Boys
it's
to
like a
men.
younger,
Boys to men.
right? Whereas, so I think terminology is, as it's a big deal, and I think female. I don't know. It separate. It creates a separation that's. At least I think it is not really there. So yeah, that's just a pet peeve of mine. Not females, women.
How do you feel about that?
I'm.
Women / female.
Do
Do you care? Was that something you would think? Or now that you heard it, you're like, yeah, that's actually good.
Yeah, I mean, Phillips pointed it out to me before, and I think his point, makes sense. I think that, women sounds more human than females.
So like a cow.
Yeah, and then people just don't really think about it, and he's thought about it. So I, props for that.
As a male to think of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my advice.
Yes.
My advice.
Your advice.
To women entrepreneurs. I mean, I sometimes don't really feel like I chose this path, but like it just kind of like chose me.
It chose you. That's true. That's true.
Like I was kind of really had a difficult time finding myself in any other path, so that's how I knew. And I know some young women entrepreneurs who seem to be like that too. So
that makes sense.
my advice mostly has been like very motivational and doing everything to keep not get discouraged. And I mean that's kind of the advice that you would get for any entrepreneur. I just think that maybe for women it has more weight when it comes from another woman, because they understand right away some of the challenges that you're dealing with, that like
Yeah, I think
It's the
women-
same advice, but coming from a woman, it's more credible for another woman.
But I also think you guys have more stuff, real world stuff to deal with, right? Like, there's the pressure for marriage,
Yeah.
biological
Oh my God.
clock.
Raise capital before you're 30. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Raise capital, get married, have your first kid before 30.
Yeah.
Right?
Or
That's all.
Don't
That's all you
start
gotta
a
do.
company until you're 40 and you have money in the bank. No, I don't know. Like that.
See, but that's.
I didn't follow that advice, FYI. So,
But
I'm not an example.
But if you look at traditional investment, investors like to invest in younger people. I think mostly because they know they can get more out of them, right? Like if I give $1 million to, let's say it's the equal, I give $1 million to a kid that's 21 that I know can work on this 50 hours a day, or a single mom, right?
Yeah.
It's a choice of, okay, how much time can this person spend on making sure I get my money back?
Sure.
And I think this is part of what needs to start to get shifted around, because
I mean, the single mom probably has a lot more common sense.
yeah,
Then-
exactly, and managerial experience,
Yeah.
stress, understanding, let's say. But I think as a woman, a woman entrepreneur, I just, from the, we work with people in MetaBronx of all aspects of life, and we always talk about how much harder it is to be a female woman in this line of work. And then I think part of that, like, subconscious thing, VCs also probably think, they won't voice it, of course, but as a woman, does that ever, like...
Yeah, I mean, ever since we went deeper into education, I feel like I've like faced it less actually.
Oh, yeah?
But when I was raising money, like, I mean, technology is definitely a man's world.
Sure.
Venture capital also a man's world.
White man's world.
People just don't really believe what I'm saying.
I mean, as a minority, I get the same thing.
Yeah.
So, I think,
Yeah, I can.
It's like they tell you, you have to have a really big vision, which I do.
but then they don't.
But then they don't exactly. They yeah.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely
It's a bit
the
of a
case
paradox.
that I've been to pitch meetings with Sarah, with Miguel, and then one of the first cohort entrepreneurs is a white guy, just like me, heterosexual white man, from a pretty well-to-do background, and going to pitch meetings with him is night and day with going to pitch meetings with anyone who's not a heterosexual white man. I would say that the different and I get treated differently. I'm exactly the same person going to those meetings, but I get treated differently depending on who it is that I'm with. And I understand that to a certain extent that's normal, but what's not normal is just how different it is. I mean, we're talking about when I've been to pitch meetings with the white guy, and it's two white dudes, there's never any question about, are we able to do this? In fact, there's almost the assumption that we've already
done it.
Found some major technical breakthrough, even though we never get asked if that's the case. But it's almost assumed that just us being in the room means that that's happened, which is just ludicrous to begin with. But then if I'm with Sarah or Miguel, the assumption is, on the other side of the table, the assumption is clearly like the first thing that comes to people's minds seems to be, not only have these people not really done anything in tech before, but they're probably somehow not capable of doing it. Or if they are, my chances of success as an investor are 10% of what they would be if it was just the standard, two white dudes, co-founders of a startup. So that's, from my own personal experience. And like I said, I'm the same person at each of those meetings. So I should be taken as seriously regardless of who I'm with. That would just be logical. So yeah, that's my... for having been in all these situations, the bias is just incredible. And if I'm with Sarah, a lot of the time you can definitely feel the people on the other side of the table thinking through, okay, is there a tech person among these two people? Regardless of the fact that I've been building software for 20 years. So again, I've been building software for 20 years. That's true whoever I'm with, right? So why would there be more doubt if I'm with a woman that I can do that? It just blows my mind.
It's funny because I don't experience, like, I haven't been in the meetings with you and Andrew, so it wasn't until you told me that people weren't believing what I was saying that I realized that was why I was having a hard time getting my point across.
I've literally been in meetings where I felt like I had to prove. Like, I've literally said, I can show you and walk you through the code to repel that feeling. Because I've felt it, right? Like, you don't believe a Puerto Rican kid from the Bronx can do this.
And they don't. I confirm.
Exactly. So I'm like, let me show you, just so you... But that's already a defeatism kind of, like...
it's kind of done, right? Like, already, you haven't even started, and it's already over.
Yeah.
You walked into the room, and already people are like, all right.
And that's why it's just... I really like to always emphasize the benefit of the doubt. Because it's such a simple thing, but that's exactly what it is. It's like you have a first impression or you have like a first instinct, and it's about getting over that, and like sort of trying to approach it with a clean slate, which I think that's the benefit of the doubt.
That's part of the problem, right? Yeah. It's not up to you.
It doesn't really matter what you do.
What you think or what you put yourself... Sure, you could be the most confident person, but if the person who makes the decision has a bias...
Yeah.
And they don't know they have it.
Yeah.
Right? Because economically, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, if someone has done something or is perfectly capable of doing something, not enabling them because they're not a man or they don't have the same skin color you do is nonsense. Like, either it's a capitalist system and we invest in the things that we think, the ideas and the companies that we think will do well, and then why should it matter what people look like, what they talk like? That's not the point. Either the work is done or it's not.
It's just historical, like statistics. So that's what they're going off of, right? But they're not. They're not taking into account. It's kind of like baseball, right? Like, oh, Babe Ruth, best home run hitter ever. Yeah, because you didn't allow black people to play for 50 years, right? Like,
well, if it always comes down to the same thing, and I think with women, it's really pronounced. You have Group A, that's men. You have Group B, that's women. You treat Group A a certain way, and you treat Group B a different way. And then you look at the results, and you're like, oh, well, Group A did better than Group B. So the people in Group A must somehow be better at this. But if you didn't give Group B the same access then there's absolutely no way that the results from Group B are going to be as good as Group A, regardless of how good the people in either group are.
Yep.
There's just no way to make that comparison. So, walking into pitch meetings with Sarah specifically, sometimes I just want to kind of stop the conversation and say, why don't you just assume that Sarah is a white guy? And, let's just carry on.
Man.
Yeah, let's just carry on from there. Like, should she be wearing a mask?
I'm like the Richard Hendricks of women founders.
Well, Richard Hendricks, yeah. So, and in particular, and we've had this conversation, in the course of building the glass files. I've had these conversations with other women who are entrepreneurs. To me, the real complexity here is we have a system of innovation that really isn't built around the needs that women have in their lives. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Go.
Yeah.
Right. So being successful in that system, since it wasn't built for you,
Yep.
or by you,
Hmm.
and what
chance do you have, right?
Yeah. Or how.
I mean, it's difficult, but I mean, I see a lot of women who are successful.
How do you? Oh, I have a good one.
And then, yeah, I mean, then it's all kind of like the people that you have around you,
But do you ever?
right? Your team, and how open-minded are they? So
this is another
that's
thing.
a huge factor. Like I wouldn't have got this far if it weren't for you, for sure. And then and it's a network, it's a support system. So everybody who buys into.
But that works for males, too, men too.
Yeah.
It's just.
Well, with men, they may understand a little better how to help each other out, but for men to be open-minded to do, I don't know. You could maybe.
Well, I mean,
It's
what
not
about-
easy.
Yeah.
Our communication.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, it all comes down to the simple idea.
And sometimes
the
it's-
system's just not
yeah.
built to suit your
No.
needs.
No, it's not.
Also,
So no, I mean,
I
I'm get to kind of figure out how it could be better, but it's not, but only a tiny piece of that, and it's very much about. It's very personal. I don't really see a lot of examples out there that I can follow.
Have you ever? This is something that I've heard.
It's
many
hard when you
times.
don't have any money.
Hard what?
Like when you have limited resources.
Sure.
Yeah.
One thing that I've heard many times is you have to be a certain type of woman to excel in this world, right? And I've even heard that from women. Like I've heard, I actually met a girl who raised a lot of money, and she straight up told me, you have to be aggressive, super aggressive. And
Yeah.
she's a super aggressive, and she's raised millions of dollars doing that. So how do you feel about that? Because you're not super aggressive, but you still have raised money, and
No, I'm not super aggressive, but I'm super opinionated, and I'm definitely independently minded, very independent. But I'm not your typical, I'm not type A or whatever you would call that. So yeah, I think that there's a lack of diversity among the types of women founders. And it's the women who know how to adapt better to the systems that men use. It makes sense that they would be able to exploit those better. But then I think that And then there's like a kind of like tension that sets in because you got this far, and so you might expect like other people to have to do the same thing as you to get as far, but I don't really see how that helps all women in the long run.
Yeah. Makes sense, because men, it's not really like that for men.
For me, it was a lot of the time I didn't understand that those were like it was through conversations with other people that I realized that these were the ways that I was different as a founder, as a woman founder. And so then I could learn how to leverage those things or talk about them so that, you know, you can not overcome it, but use it as a strength rather than a weakness.
And what about groups of women angel investors? There's a number of entrepreneurship groups just focused on women. What have you found in those contexts?
I mean, I just have found that I don't really fit in to those types of communities. I don't really know why. It's weird. I've also found that other women didn't believe what I was saying. 'Cause I think that just... Because I think that as a person, like, I'm also a little bit, like, of an outlier. But I don't really look like I am. Because I'm trying to not look like an outlier so that I can, like...
blend in.
Exactly. Get the money. Get the investment. Yeah.
It's a pretty tough world.
Yeah.
It's absurdly complex.
So actually, I love being in the Bronx. I love being in the Bronx.
And
I love talking to high schoolers in the Bronx because, like, I'm definitely from a completely different experience than they are. But when we go and teach the workshops so we have a workshop on how to be a digital historian where we teach students how to tell their family stories using the Glassfiles software. And I like to introduce those workshops by telling the story of my grandfather, and that he was basically the same age that they are when he made the realizations that saved his life. And I do feel that when I tell that story, the students know exactly what I'm talking about. Because I think that when they are that age, there's like a clear, they might have a more clear vision of things that make sense and that don't.
Especially in these communities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like they can see the things that adults who are like jaded have already like been, have experienced like failure in life and become disillusioned, don't see as clearly anymore. And I think it's really important to like value that specific thing that you have when you are that age. That's a real asset. So I like that makes me feel I just love discovering that I could connect with people who are completely different than me by telling the story of my grandfather. That's like more powerful to me.
I actually wonder if that gets them more interested in history overall.
I hope so.
I wonder if they go home and Google
That's
how Nazi, in Austria, how it worked, right? Like,
well,
that makes sense, right? Like, because now you're connecting it. Because once they hear that story, they think about, okay, how's that kind of affect me or work with me, and then
I don't know if they're gonna go and Google like the Holocaust, but what I've noticed is that they're more likely to dig into like a lot of them are from immigrant families.
Sure.
So there's definitely a recent story of like displacement and drama. Mm-hmm. And so they might Google like a revolution that happened in their country. And for a lot of these, that the memory of that might only be like 1 or 2 generations away. So there's still
enough time to get there.
You can still collect the information. You can still ask specific questions. And the thing that, it wasn't my idea to ask my grandfather. It was my mom's idea.
But she didn't want to do it.
Well, I feel like there's a bond between grandparents and grandchildren that, you know, like you
She
have
won't
to
tell you no.
exactly, but she knows that there's value there. My
You're
grandfather's
probably
not
the only
going to
one
go
that
up and talk to me about it. I'm too young to think about that. So you really need that like communication across
each generation.
yeah,
like,
to get that, because it might just not come out.
Sure.
And you don't even know what you're going to learn. So every time that I go back and look at the stories, like it never gets old, because there's another detail, another thing that I'm realizing. That's how he put this and this together. Like how incredible it was that he thought that way when he was
At
16.
that age, yep,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's an awesome story. I suggest you all go check out theglassfiles.com. And
Yeah.
Sarah, tell them how they can be in touch with you.
Well, we're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We have a historians group as well as a page. So I'm like I check all of them. I'm pretty easily reachable through there. And then theglassfiles.com. You can create your account for free and share media with the community in the world. And then our premium feature is the private families. So everything's privacy centric, right? You get complete control over your media. We don't take a third party license because we want people to feel like it's really theirs, and there's, you know, it's secure and it's private.
As opposed to Facebook. Total opposite.
Yeah, I mean, it's just different. The point is that you're not going to get distracted. You're not going to get like overwhelmed with information that you didn't really want to see. Because there's like an aspect of randomness on Facebook where you could just be exposed to anything.
Yeah. Kid picture, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Funny video. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were family history and history. So it's the first time that the word Trump is in this conversation, but yeah, it's not like there are fewer and fewer Nazis these days, right? There's
More and more.
more and more Nazis.
Yeah.
Right.
The Nazi.
Or like,
In the United States.
like also like older Nazis coming out of the woodwork.
Sure, like all the
Oh,
Nazis,
yeah.
like,
Yes,
we told
we're
you, yeah,
back.
we're back. It only took what, like,
Yeah.
it's about 70 years, right? And so 70 years later, here we are, kind of contemplating.
Another possible.
Yeah, I mean,
Holocaust.
I
Well, I mean, there are holocausts going
Oh, no,
on
yeah.
in the
Africa,
world.
stuff
Like
that,
there,
sure,
there are
sure.
situations. I
It's
mean,
just
it
the
might.
United
It's not.
States. We went and fought the Nazis to guarantee freedom and stuff. So now the fact that in the United States, there are people who
There's a rise of extremist thought in general, whether it's
Right.
being a
Europe,
Nazi
too.
or
Yeah.
being, some other type of extremist. Just it's a way of thinking.
But I think to tie it back to Glass Files, I think eventually, I think this keeps happening because not enough people are educated on the
right, they
last
literally
time
have
it
no
happened.
idea. Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah.
we think of the Nazis and Hitler as from one day to the next there was this really bad person, but just bad people who had all
He
this.
just stole the presidency or whatever, right? But
Yeah,
it's
right. It's
he
like
was voted in.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. First he was
Yeah.
elected, and then I guess your grandfather's story really. He thought, well, no, this is not gonna go well, and
Yeah.
people around him said, "Oh, it's gonna be fine."
But kind of like, I mean, it's a little bit like, I don't think it's the same as with. It's not exactly the same as with Donald Trump, but it's like the people who think that this is gonna pass. Maybe it will, but
Maybe it won't.
but the people who thought that during my grandfather's time ended up in concentration camps and were murdered. So it's kind of like, well, what's the worst? You have to keep the worst case scenario in mind.
Yeah, and I mean,
there's no justification for for being okay with letting things like slip
Escalate.
into a certain direction. Exactly.
yeah, because
Like apathy is the worst.
right. Because I mean, we hear about fake news. There's also an increasing amount of fake history.
Yeah, changing history.
Yeah, modifying history.
That's because I think part of
Inventing countries like Russia, like Novorossiya. They just like invented it. They came up with these
so that's why
old maps of this country that just never existed.
It's kind of why I think this type of project is so important, because it's kind of like its own blockchain in a way, right? If enough people are telling the story,
Like that way of putting it.
it's like, okay, 1,000 people are telling it this way, and this publication is telling it this way.
Right.
More likely that these guys have it right versus them. And before it was only the publication, so you have to take what they said. But now a program like this has the ability to, if enough people are on it telling their stories, there's a way to track it and be like, wait a minute.
Crowdsourcing history.
Exactly. So, again, check out theglassfiles.com.
Yes,
Sarah
please.
Poyet. And
I'm on LinkedIn.
Yes. Investors, if you want to invest in the Glass Files. And just to support the community. Part of why this show exists is we want people to come on and and tell their story, but then people watching, just by signing up for the Glass Files, you help the community as a whole, right? So just by logging into the Glass Files, signing up, putting in your email, that equals traction, where Sarah can take that traction and generate more revenue for the business and keep it going. And that's part of what I feel like doesn't happen in communities of color and for women founders. There's not enough support of...
like mutual support.
Exactly. Of these type of entities. But you see apps that have 1,000 users sell for $1 million, right? And again, white founders, right? So it's like we have to, if the bar keeps moving, there's enough people in these communities to move with it. We just have to start supporting the startups, and hopefully you support the Glass Files.
Thank you for making that point. That's a really important one.
Any final words from you, Philip?
Nope.
All right. Tune in next week.
Yeah. Thanks,
for the Bronx
guys.
Tech Show.
Thank you.
See you next week.
See ya.
Thank you.